It's important to understand that when we're having debates with other people about Israel and the ethical morality of the war that Israel's fighting against our enemies, it's very important to understand who we're talking to. That in the overwhelming majority of cases, the people that we're debating have no idea what they're talking about. A classic example is this interview that was set from Jane Dutton. She's the anchor of Al Jazeera English. Unfortunately, she's from South Africa, which is where I'm from. I'm quite embarrassed. And she was interviewing Douglas Murray about what's going on in Israel. It's cringeworthy, and very important for us to understand how absolutely uninformed, misinformed, and how incorrect. That's the nicest way I can say it. How absolutely incorrect the people that stand with Palestine, that stand with Hamas, that stand with Gaza are. You can make this stuff up. Take a look.
I don't think that at all that what's happening in Gaza is genocide. I think it's an unbelievable smear against Israel. I've covered that war as I've covered many others.
Don't you think it's a self-inflicted smear against Israel?
No, I mean, I was in Ukraine last year.
A self-inflicted smear, like what exactly is that supposed to mean? Is that something that Israel brought upon itself? The fact that that the anti-Semites are calling Israel a genocide, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just some sort of a narrative that she's desperately trying to implement.
Are the Ukrainians committing genocide? I ask you.
What's that got to do with Israel?
I ask you, there are many wars going on.
Yeah.
Is Ukraine committing genocide?
No.
Right.
Is Russia committing genocide?
Russia is committing a war of hostile aggression, for sure. Although it doesn't seem to be attempting to eradicate the Ukrainian population as a whole, which is, of course, what genocide is.
Which is what Israel seems to be doing with Palestine.
Which is not doing.
I know that you work for Fox News, and I was called by Fox News some time back to talk about the genocide happening in South Africa, and I said there is no genocide happening in South Africa. So I was surprised that Fox could then see what was happening in South Africa as genocide, and yet what's happening in Israel as...
I don't speak for Fox.
It's amazing. The facts have nothing to do with anything. Ukraine, Russia, like she doesn't even understand the question. We're focusing on one single genocide, which is our narrative, which is what exactly we're supposed to be talking about right now, and that's a genocide. Now, the fact that a genocide is a campaign in which the victim is losing 25% of its population or more has nothing to do with the facts, because we know that the population in Gaza has increased by 1,056% since 1950. And if you want to count since October 7th, Gaza has increased its population by 43,000 people. So if Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, they're doing a really, really poor job at a genocide, which doesn't happen to qualify for a genocide. But hey, it doesn't fit her narrative. So on she goes, continuing to embarrass herself.
The allegation of genocide against Israel, why would Israel be committing genocide in Gaza?
Like, well, what would you describe it?
It's a war. It's which I've seen up close.
Okay.
So let me just explain that. If you start a war, which is what Hamas did on the 7th of October, if you start a war, there are repercussions. There are repercussions to Russia for starting a war against Ukraine. Russia's lost a lot of troops. There are repercussions for Hamas for starting a war against Israel.
Do you think there are repercussions for an illegal occupation?
What's the illegal occupation?
Of Israel against the Palestinians.
Where?
That is an illegal occupation.
Where?
It is a determined illegal occupation.
Gaza?
Of course, Gaza and the West Bank.
Have you been to Gaza?
Yes, I have.
Is it occupied by the Israelis?
It's completely sealed off, as you know. That's
by
why
who?
They call it by the Israelis.
And who?
By the Israelis, by the US, and whoever else.
And who else?
The US.
Isn't that enough?
No, tell me who else is allegedly sealing the Gaza.
I'm saying that Israel has completely encircled Gaza.
This lady has no clue. She probably couldn't find Gaza on a map. She has no idea what she's talking about. But Douglas Murray, I mean, respect to this guy. He just shreds her to pieces, and he's enjoying every moment.
Nothing goes in, nothing goes
Gaza
out, as you know.
Well, as you know, if you've been, Gaza also has a border with Egypt. Why do you not mention Egypt? Egypt has a stronger fence to fence in the people of Gaza than Israel
so you agree
does.
that Gaza has been fenced off?
No, it's fenced off, although you might note that there are more workers until the 7th allowed into Israel to work and indeed to have medical treatments and others that were considered necessary, which Hamas doesn't provide. There was plenty more people every day coming into work in Israel from Gaza until the 7th than were going the other way into Egypt. So if I go back to this question, why do you say there's an illegal occupation of Gaza? Why did you?
Respect to Douglas Murray. I mean, he's really being very patient. I actually feel like he's like this cat who's playing with his mouse. He knows that she's cornered and she's really embarrassing herself, and he's relishing the opportunity to really school her and give her an education. How could you possibly be blockading someone if you don't actually encircle them entirely? So she keeps on insisting on her narrative, recreating the map as if Egypt doesn't exist, when in reality, Israel's only surrounding Gaza on the one side, and Israel doesn't even need to let Gazans into Israel if they don't want to, which is what Israel does. Israel, before October 7th, would allow many, many, many Gazans every single day to come into Israel. These were the same people who were working in Israeli homes, feeding their families by good pay that they would get in Israel, and they were mapping out and spying out those homes, those kibbutzim, those villages, those fields, those farmhouses, telling the terrorists exactly where to find, who to find, and what to find. It was the hospitality of the Israelis, of these Gazans, something not provided at all by the Egyptians, that was the downfall of the Jews on October 7th. Tragic, but this lady, this Jane Dutton, does not back down and continues in her insensible approach, irrational approach. It doesn't make any sense to continue to insist that somehow Israel's blockading of Gaza.
You say that?
Because there is.
Why? Well, who
Israel
is occupying
is an occupying state.
No.
It is
hang on.
internationally recognized.
No. It's not. It's not at all.
I want to move
that's
on.
your view. Hang on. That's your view, and I have to correct your view.
Our views
I have
differ.
to correct. No, it doesn't. The fact.
Clearly outsmarted. This lady is trying desperately to change the topic. Now you can see this sheepish smile, this grin on her face as if she knows what she's talking about. But she just realizes she can't argue with Douglas Murray, so she's desperately going to try and change the topic. And unfortunately, Douglas is not going to let her do that. This whole talk about an illegal occupation, by the way, anytime you hear about the hallowed term of the illegal occupation or the right of return of the Palestinians, there is no such thing in international law. It was merely a recommendation by the United Nations resolution, I believe it was resolution 194, in which they made a recommendation where they said that Israel should concede certain territories to the Palestinians, but that doesn't mean that it became international law. Anybody who says that does not know what they're talking about, just like this lady. Let's see what else she has to say.
Facts. Our views might differ, but the facts are the facts, and I want to pick you up on something you just did.
I'm interviewing you.
I know, but
Yes.
I think you're uninformed.
No.
So let me just.
Hardly.
So let me. You are uninformed
Oh,
because
really?
first of all,
Yes.
you didn't say that Egypt is blockading Gaza. Secondly, you claim that Israel.
I'm talking about Israel here, and I want to move.
It's
I want
very
to move on
convenient
from
for
this.
you to mention Israel
Oh.
because you've clearly got an animus here. But let me come on to the second point. Let me come to the second point. As you well know, in 2005, Israeli troops ripped Jewish families from their home in the Gaza.
That was after Palestinians had been ripped from their homes in Gaza.
I mean, how far back do you want to go?
Okay,
You can do the
no.
Hebron massacre of 1924
No,
if you want.
absolutely.
But let me just let me
let's get
finish.
to what I want to
allow me to finish one point.
What I want to talk
but allow
about
me
is
to finish
we're
a
talking
point.
about the action at the International Court of
No.
Justice. Okay.
But first of all,
we're
before
talking
we go on
about
to that, you've got to
South
inform
Africa's
your viewers.
actions there.
Yes, but we've got to inform your viewers of the facts, and you just misled them. In 2005, Israeli troops ripped every Jewish family from their homes in Gaza and handed over all of Gaza, which was completely clear of Jews.
That was after two Nakbas, I think in 1948 and 1967, when Palestinians were ripped from their homes that were originally there.
That's your.
I know. So let's agree.
Another total Baba Mesa in 1948. He Arabs were not ripped from their homes. What happened was actually that the invading Arab armies of 1948, as soon as Israel declared independence in 1948, when the British left left the land, the invading Arab army said they told their brethren to leave Israel so that they would be able to just massacre all the Jews en masse. And then when they finish with the Jews, they'll be able to come back. Problem is, those who voluntarily left were never able to come back because they weren't counting on Israel actually winning the war. Same thing happened, by the way, in 1967, when it was actually Egypt and Syria and the other Arab nations around Israel. They were vowing to drive Israel into the sea. And at the very last moment, with their armies amassed on the borders, Israel initiated the air attack on the airfields of Syria and Egypt, thus effectively neutralizing their air defenses or air attack abilities, and thus Israel was able to win the 6-Day War. But they were the ones who invaded it, who were threatening to invade Israel in the 6-Day War, and miraculously Israel was able to win the Gaza Strip. Israel was able to win the Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, which is a false narrative, as well as to win the Golan Heights from Syria. When you start a war, you better be willing to lose it. Don't come crying 50 years later and say that we stole the land from you. This lady is so uninformed. It's terrifying, but she actually represents the insanity and the irrational views of so many pro-Hamas supporters. It's important to understand how Douglas Murray rips her arguments to shreds and proves her to be nothing more than pathetic. I don't think he's going to be invited anytime soon back onto her show. Let's take a look at what else. How this ends. It gets even more cringeworthy.
Big interpretation of the history, and yours is a very no. But we can agree to disagree, but don't misinform your viewers. And
Likewise.
you can go back. Well, I'm not misinforming your viewers. I'm informing them because you're not. The point that I'm trying to make, which
Israel
you keep
moved away
on,
from Gaza, and Gaza has been sealed off
the
ever
point
since.
you keep on trying to distract everyone from is that Israel took every Jew from Gaza in 2005, handed it over to the Palestinians, who then voted in Hamas, and to the great detriment of the Palestinian people. They have been ruled by Hamas for the last 18 years. If you want to look to the source of the conflict, look to that fact.
Okay, so how many illegal settlements are there in the West Bank that's also illegal under the United Nations, under international law? Those settlements on the West Bank are illegal.
Which ones were
legal
in your view?
In the Middle East, and every time there would be a peace agreement, settlements would pop up, and that's why we are where we are today.
No, it's not.
So let's try and move on.
No,
let's try and move
on. It's not
on.
at all why we are where we are.
Hang
on.
We're not achieving anything here, so let's try and move on.
No.
Let's try and move on.
No, it's very because you just did it again. You just threw in another false fact. We are not where we are today because of settlements in the West Bank that are disputed. That's not why Hamas broke out of Gaza on the 7th of October and massacred people in their homes.
As
that's
we know,
that's
Hamas
not
got
because of the
Israeli
West Bank,
support
and you well
to take
know
on
it. You well know that.
You well know.
It's quite amazing because, as Douglas points out, there were no Jewish settlements, so-called settlements, in Gaza on October 7th because 18 years prior, Israel had evacuated the Gaza Strip and effectively given the Arabs a two-state solution, given them their own states. By the way, in 1967, when the invading Arab armies were about to invade Israel, there also were no settlements. We had not yet conquered Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, not yet conquered the Golan Heights, and not yet conquered the Gaza Strip. So there were no settlements. This whole argument is totally nonsensical.
That Hamas, you well know that Hamas did not commit the massacre of the 7th of October because of settlements. They did it by their own admission because they want to massacre every Jew they can get their hands on, and Hamas has said they will do it again and again. So don't get onto the distraction of settlements. That is a second-order priority. The first order...
It's easy to fob those off, isn't it?
It's easy for you to try to distract people about it. But I'm saying, don't
Okay,
distract them from the crimes of Hamas. Don't do that.
I'm not distracted.
Well, you are. You just said that's why they did it. You said they did it because of the settlements.
And those crimes by Hamas were repugnant.
I'm glad you said that,
despicable.
finally.
Finally. But what I'm
Or he's
saying,
been here for some time with you going on
what
about
I'm
settlements and
saying
everything
is,
else.
so we've got an
Good, you
illegal
said that.
occupying force. We've got a situation that is making. I mean,
Who's the
Hamas has
illegal
grown.
occupying force?
Hamas has grown in popularity ever since this war on Gaza because Israel is making people more and more increasingly militant. So what is happening at the moment?
Israel's making people more militant.
Is not working.
Do you think that Hamas is making people more militant or not?
Let's go back to the ICJ.
Do you think that Hamas is making
statement.
people more militant or not?
Well, it's a catch-22,
Oh,
isn't it?
I see.
And I mean, until this illegal occupation is broken, until the suffering of the Palestinians is acknowledged.
Do you think that Hamas are interested in a solution where there's any Jew in that region or not?
I'm asking you the questions, and
Well,
I want you to
I'd love
move
you to
on
answer that one.
No, we can answer it. Let's just move on.
Okay, have a go then.
Okay. So
have
ICJ,
a go. Do you think Hamas want a peaceful solution with the Jews?
I'm asking you the questions. We can discuss this afterwards.
Oh no, I'd love to do this one on air. Do you think Hamas want to live beside the Jews? Yes or no?
They have recently said that they would be happy to live next to Jews, but they want a two-state solution. A two-state solution has been in the offing.
Hamas has not said they want a two-state solution. They carried out a massacre on October the 7th of as many people as they could, stole a lot of hostages who you still also haven't referred to. There's more than 100 Jewish hostages still in Gaza.
Correct.
That's real kidnapping, and that's real occupation of somebody. And Hamas has said they do it again and again.
How do you feel when you see those children who've been shot in the back of the head? How do you feel when you see those children?
The Jewish
who are
children or the
suffering,
Palestinian children?
The Palestinian children.
I feel the same on each of them.
Okay.
I think it's all a tragedy.
Okay, good.
And I think
it is
it's
a
all on
tragedy
Hamas.
both sides.
I think
so
it's
let's
all
try
on
and move
Hamas.
on.
They shouldn't have started a war. There's consequences to starting a war.
This lady is clearly out of her league and in no way ready to debate an intellectual, somebody who actually knows what he's talking about, like Douglas Murray. And that's why she constantly tries to keep on changing the topic. Her final point is just so absurd, where she says that Hamas is interested in a two-state solution, desperate to try to whitewash the purpose of Hamas, when in their own charter it states that they are committed to the destruction of every single Jew. In fact, Mahmoud Abbas, who is the president of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, of the Palestinian Authority, in his own PhD is a Holocaust denier, and he's not even part of Hamas. He's even more more progressive than the Hamas, and even that is supposedly more progressive than the Hamas. Even he is a Holocaust denier. We're dealing here with a war of awareness versus burying your head in the sand. We're fighting a war against utter ignorance, which is bordering on willful distortion of facts. Don't be intimidated. This lady made an absolute buffoon of herself. When you have the courage to stand up for what you believe in, you will do the same. Don't take anything for granted. Don't accept their premise. Challenge their every premise. Educate yourself with the facts. Be an ambassador for Israel, and you too can be a light unto the nations.